Well, here we are at home instead of being all together in Brazil. I want to thank you all for the invitation and for making the effort of recording this to adjust even not just spatial separation but time separation. So I want to respond to the prompt for today's meeting, which was to address the challenges which the global COVID-19 epidemic has posed to us as researchers and our research agendas. And there's no shortage of choices of issues one could raise in response. The challenges have been boundless, from the obvious one of how as social scientists, especially anthropologists, we were no longer able to carry out research in the fashion for which we are known, in a participatory, long-term embedded way. Or the challenge of how COVID-19 has disadvantaged women researchers, as somehow homeschooling has reinforced ancient structural biases and has given them disproportionate responsibilities on the home front. Or how students have been disadvantaged through online learning. And. These are challenges for which there are only partial solutions, and in fact, the effect of these will be felt for a long time ahead. But then there are also these challenges which raise new questions, and this is on where I want to focus today. One of these questions which I want to discuss here and which was brought into sharp relief through the pandemic and was given an entirely new dimension is, do you trust the police with your health? I imagine most people would respond to this question doubtfully, if not in the negative. And yet, it might actually be exactly what we have already been doing for quite a while, willing or unwillingly, aware or unaware of such missions and directives. In fact, the increasing securitization of health is a decisive phenomenon of our time. Health, as in both public or global health, often thought of as its own prominent domain, has become a cornerstone of both national and global security concerns. The corona pandemic is just the most recent example of such trajectory. It literally crowns a genealogy of threats which have given rise to what some have called the health and security nexus. This genealogy, which in turn justifies new interventions and policies, has been constructed as starting with the HIV/AIDS virus. The HIV/AIDS virus and the way it spread in Africa, especially among the productive generation, was said to destroy national economies and turn states into failing states. This was first highlighted by the CIA in 1990. In 2000, this was taken up by the UN Security Council, discussing, and here I quote Fourie, for the first time in its history, what was ostensibly a health issue in terms of security. This made sense, as it was the end of the Cold War period, where increasingly East-West bloc politics were giving way to apprehensions about failing states and new forms of terrorism for which such failed state structures were seen as breeding ground. The global recognition that health threats are also security threats has manifested itself and can be identified by decisive documents and policy decisions. The 2007 World Health Report, entitled A Safer Future, Global Public Health Security in the 21st Century, is one of these documents. The report presents a response by the WHO, the World Health Organization, to accumulation of worries and calls of action by global health and security experts regarding increasingly infectious disease threats, both man-made, as in biological weapons, and laboratory practices, and natural, as in the spread of viral mutations. The security threat which was identified here, was biological matter of extreme mobility, increased due to globalization and its criminal underbelly. And yet, it is in the recent COVID-19 pandemic which has seen the most global, but also the most comprehensive and unprecedented way of bringing together health and security. This involves many ad hoc rules and legal regulations, often pushed through under emergency clauses. In many countries, it had been the police which has been charged with enforcing these rules and regulations. One prominent aspect is the policing of people's mobilities, or rather immobilities, making sure that people not only stay at home but also wear their mask and keep social distance. There's also the enforcement of bans on public gatherings, the control of crossing of borders and limiting immigration, the surveillance of quarantine measures, and the contact track and tracing of infected people, all in the name of health. In South Africa, as in many other places, this has taken a particular vicious form. Even though a hard lockdown involving a complete curfew was to bring its population to the verge of social and economic suicide, with hunger and unemployment looming large, already just after a few days, the majority of people adhered to it. Why? There are many answers to it. A central one is because of the role of the police and the military, who had been called upon to enforce the lockdown. And they did so with great enthusiasm and terrible consequences. A few weeks into lockdown, more people had died at the hand of military and the police than of the virus. Paternalistic and humiliating practices of slapping people over the face or of making them doing push-ups in the street became fearful realities. Thousands of people were arrested and ended up not just with a fine, but a criminal record. This criminalization for doing things which often were about mere survival reminds one strongly about apartheid times, where seeking work as a black person in the city without the right papers could land you in prison. And yet, there's something quite different about this recent iteration of policing. It is the imperative of health which seems to be able to write these excesses off as collateral damage. Health here stands as an absolute value, to save lives, and as these recent events shows, a lot is being allowed and cordoned in its name. And there's more to come. We have been given the predictions that the coronavirus will be with us for decades. We are also facing the prospect that there will be more such viruses to emerge as part of the crisis of the Anthropocene. What kind of rules reconfiguring our biomedical daily lives as we know them will be required next time? And who will make sure that we keep to these rules? Possibly then the securitization of health will be less so just part of a temporary state of exception, but a common and taken for granted feature of our future lives. It might go as far as that our worries about health just by itself will lose in importance if it's not also a security concern. Considering such intensification and future trajectory of this alliance, we need to understand better what we are signing up for. What happens when we put these two domains of actors and institutions, rationales and values, and knowledge and subjects together? What kind of health will we get, and what kind of security will we get? As I suggest in my hopefully forthcoming book, In Search of a Mission, The Policing of Fake Medication, the security sector has a lot to gain from a health agenda. It can give them new meaning and can fix their reputation. By animating their practice in the name of health, they can also fiercely expand their territory and discretion. Through new partnerships with state actors, which were beyond their prerogative until then, new entitlements might emerge. To repeat what I concluded in a short article in City and Society, security practices on their own can be bad enough, but putting health and security together while claiming to offer a potent remedy especially when there's none, it is also a medicine on which one can easily overdose. Thank you, everyone. And now I would love to participate in the discussion. Thank you. I hope you have a very fruitful discussion.
The streets of Niterói are baking, feel like my whole body's aching, don't know how much more I have to give.